Hey guys, welcome to Nomads Nation podcast. Today I am here with Lara, who is the founder of Move Supply Chain. And you guys, well, full disclosure, you work with us at Firo, and you've been helping us just get all of our ducks in a row when it comes to all things operations, logistics. And you and I were talking about, I was telling you how interesting it is in this industry. Bags are out of stock all the time. And it's such an interesting thing because there's two sides of this. On the consumer side, so many bag fans and just travelers and people who want to, have a good work bag. They're like, hey, I found the bag that I want and it's gone and it's not back for 5 months. Why is this happening? And then on the bag brand owner side, I wanted to make this content too, to try and help owners maybe optimize their own supply chains and try and work on that timeline with their own cash flow. So I figured I'd bring in, the absolute expert for that. Laura, thanks for jumping on. How you doing today?
Yay, good. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for pronouncing my name super correct.
Uh, you've trained me well.
Yes, yes.
I
So,
got I got to ask you. So I'm curious too. Like, you, how has it been like jumping into the world of bags? Because when we first started, like your career has spanned so many different industries, and you've done so many different things. I mean, you started at KFC, right? Like, doing like their actual logistics and that. Yeah. So you've done a lot, but now you're in the world of bags. You visited me in Vietnam. We were there coincidentally for a conference, and then you got to meet Luke in the Bag Me team. So, you've been, and then you did a podcast with him. So you've been kind of like sinking your teeth into the world of bags. How's that been? Have you been learning new things? Is it an interesting industry just compared to like other industries you work in?
yes, definitely. It's like I have so much learnings from the time that I've met you in Vietnam, visited Bag Me, and also interviewed Look because for me, bag is a finished goods, just like any apparel before. So, my understanding is of course you have raw materials, you have hardware, you have fabric, then you produce it how many days, and then you send it to your client. But after I met you and the best designers and manufacturers, um, I've had the opportunity to really understand how challenging and at the same time powerful is the supply chain behind every great bags design. So, um, super helpful, Aaron. So much huge help for me, not only for me but also for other supply chain experts in Move Supply Chain, because we were able to understand what's the pre-work behind a great bag. How can we help our clients, our DTC owners, to further improve their system, and then how can we help them send that products or sell that products to their clients, to their customers as well.
Yeah, because you guys also visited a bunch of factories out in Ho Chi Minh, didn't you? Like really
Yes.
high quality, more boutique, I'd say. Not boutique. I'm not sure if you visited the mega factories, but I remember you guys had went to some of the more smaller to mid-sized ones that do work for these really great premium smaller
Yes.
brands. So you've really seen a lot of the industry in the past few months, and I'm looking forward to
Yes.
picking your brain on it.
Yes. In China, we've been visiting a lot of bag brands in China. But that those bags are more of those more common generic type of bag, tote bags, regular school backpacks. But the more technical bags, I've seen how it is being created from designing to production in Vietnam. So, it answers the question why, great bags, good designs, good tech bags are always out of stock. And it's because it's harder to create from the beginning, and it's harder to design, and it's harder for the logistics and so on. So there was I had an understanding before, it's not enough, and then now that I have been exposed to that kind of manufacturing, that gives me an answer so that I can support the other DTC owners.
What is the answer then? Why are these great bags from brands small to big? And that's the part that fascinates me because I think it makes sense for a smaller brand, right? New owner, they're not sure what to do. They put their savings into this and they're just going for it. And
Mhm.
maybe they get a really good review from a great reviewer and it catches fire and then they're out of stock, right? That makes sense. But I see it too with the big brands. I mean, there's an iconic backpack in this community called the Osprey Daylight 26+6. Are you familiar with Osprey, Lada?
Yes.
They're incredible. Possibly, I always say they're the best bag brand in the world just in terms of everything that they do. and their overall impact on the industry. But that was out of stock for like months. So even the biggest brands are having this problem. So why? I mean, I have my own theories, but I'm curious, like, why, from your perspective, is it so difficult to keep these in stock?
Yeah. So it will start with the design. It will start with how you want the bags to be, sold. So from the beginning, when you're designing the bag, you've already locked down the supply chain of it. If you choose what hardware to use, what brand of zipper to use, what color, especially if you're dyeing a fabric specifically for this design, then you already have the list of lead times for all of those. And you have to consider the longest lead time every time. So for example, for the longest lead time for this specific product is dyeing a fabric, special dyeing for the fabric. So if that longest lead time is, let's say, 120 days, no, the other will wait. You can delay the POs of other hardwares and raw materials, but for this specific fabric, you cannot delay it. You're always on point. And there are so many reasons why it can also have a delay in the first level or your supplier side. For example, a YKK zipper that supports or sold 50 or support 50% of the requirement of the entire world for zippers. They made an entire vertical production of their YKK zippers. They produce their own machines, so only their machines can do it. They dye their own fabrics as well. And so when something happened, like a sudden volume of orders with YKK, then their production delivery will be delayed as well. And so if there's also like a special requirement of YKK, because they have been doing more different types of specialized types of zipper, like waterproof zipper, something like that. So
Mhm.
just with one zipper, all of the bag production can delay many months. And so that's just one aspect, is the design to raw materials preparation. And then, once that is set and you're ready to produce, you have the production. Sometimes it will not have a delay, sometimes it will have a delay. So it depends on the partner that you have, and then delivery. And then there are, like, once it arrives in the warehouse, there are also like a lot of supply chain surprises in that part. The logistics part, from Vietnam to US or Europe or UK or Australia, there's so many things that could happen. And in fact, um we've helped one brand from the same manufacturer that we visited in Vietnam that has to send all of their bags from Vietnam to China and then Europe because they cannot deliver it straight.
Mhm.
So they did not realize that making the bag in Vietnam is going to be, of course, better in terms of quality, pricing, but they didn't realize that it has to go to a different route when they start delivering it, because before they're using China. So the logistics part is another story and could have a totally different, supply chain disruptions on its own. And you know that the tariff, the war, etc. And then once it's arrived in the warehouse, checking, QC, counting, there could also be a lot of congestion in that part. The warehouse and the 3PL has their own lead time, but most often than not, there's also a lot of incoming delays, and the counting is delayed, and then so it's available later than expected. And again, I was joking about this with you earlier, that like a great review of a bag, suddenly, the forecast can change. Like, for example, you order 3,000 pieces and you're expecting it to sell in 3 months, and then you review the bag and it became so popular, and so suddenly it's 1 month and it's sold out. So aside from that, the pre-work and supply chain, there are also marketing, um unavoidable situation that could happen that can make it sold out. And so they have to like reorder faster, make rush orders, pay more on those rush orders, just so they can support the bags. And there's so many things like color of the bags. That's why black is easiest color of the bags, because the special dyeing of different fabrics can also take so much time. So I think that's the overview of why it's always out of stock. Every stage have their different challenges, and if sometimes one challenge match with another challenge, and then it's gonna be longer. You're gonna wait longer.
I feel like you just explained my entire life with Firo. Like that this is exactly the challenge of the business is this entire timeline and trying to manage the cash flow and what's going in and what's going out. And I mean, I'm actually curious, Lara. I mean, you've been done a lot in apparel, right? Like actual clothing.
Yeah.
What is a typical lead time for, let's say you want to order, you have a t-shirt company, you want to order 1,000 shirts. How long does that process usually take with apparel?
So, including the designing part, it will take roughly a month to design it, and get a golden sample.
Hmm.
And then production 30 days.
30 days. Okay, well, but let's
Yes.
say you already have a designed shirt, right? And it's sold really well. It's sold out. You want to put in a new order. I put down the deposit today. How long until a factory usually finishes that next 1,000 shirts?
Oh, gonna be 30 to 45 days.
Oh God, what a life that would be. See,
Yes.
that's I would give anything for that because in the bag world, the I think you really highlighted the complicated thing is just how many parts go into it. And this is not your typical Eastpak bag. No shade to Eastpak or to JanSport. Those bags are simple and they serve a great function. And I would imagine that bill of materials is significantly less complex. But when you get into these bags from these makers like Osprey or from Air or these more premium, very technical bags, I think that there's like 270 pieces individually that make up some bags for Firo. And that is such a complicated supply chain. And it's when you look at that versus apparel, like what would it be for a t-shirt? Like how many things go into a shirt, Lada? Is it, I mean, you need thread, you need the fabric, maybe some buttons.
The most complicated could be the type of fabric if it's special. If
Mm.
there's no special fabric for a specific t-shirt, then everything is on hand in the factory. So for the factory that is selling t-shirt, they usually have like a full warehouse of raw materials already in it. So they can, the lead time that I shared earlier, 30 days, is just for them to produce it, schedule and then produce. So when you send PO and pay the deposit today, they will schedule it right away because they already have their raw materials sitting in their own warehouse. For a bag specialized products like that, you have to order raw materials after you receive a PO. Some of it, maybe they have extra YKK zippers on stock, but the fabrics probably they have to reorder again. So it regardless if 99% of the raw materials are available, if there's 1% missing, it's gonna wait. And
That's
it
so interesting because I love that because you could actually, in theory, have all the materials in the factory, but you need one and you need this one, right? And it's like, well, everything's on hold until that is here as well. So your supply chain is only as good, or your bag is only gonna be made as fast as your slowest material that you need.
Yes, yes. So that's why this is for owners. This suggestion is that when you identify the most problematic raw materials that you have, that's the first raw materials that we have to fix. Either that you get your own stocks of that, and it's highly recommended. It's an extra cash flow, but it will save you a lot. Like if the probably the vendor will not keep it for you, because especially
Mm,
if
they
it's
won't.
if you are the only one using it and it's special for your bag, they won't keep it for you, because what if you don't order anymore, then they have
Yeah,
that.
and also they're not a storage center, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
in my experience, factories, they help out where they can, but more or
Yes.
less, it's like, hey, you're gonna need a storage unit if you want to do
Yes.
that. Hmm.
And so having your own stocks of that is the what other brands are doing, so that
Yep.
they
Can
have
I ask
backup.
Lada though, just on that note, like, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I just didn't want to lose
Yeah.
this train of thought. Like, at what point do you think it's good for a brand to do that? Because I'm kind of starting to think about that with Firo. Like we're not brand new, but we're not like established. So where do you obviously for an established brand, probably easier, right? You've got the margins, you got the cash flow, you understand your P&L, but Yeah, where do you think that line is for when a brand should really start looking into that?
I think it's not the age of or the maturity of the brand, but more of what kind of product is that? Is that the ABC product that you have? Is it the one that is giving you the best margin right now? And is it like not a seasonal type of product? You have to consider that because if it's selling all year long and it's not like you can sell it whatever season it is, then it's worth the test. And if the margin is good, that combination, margin and you can sell it all year round, then find that find those products, and of course understand how much you're selling. So if that combination, if it's an A product, not seasonal product, then then you can consider what is deep. Next step is to deep dive what is the most important raw material for this product, because this is the product that I cannot be out of stock, or if it's out of stock, the shortest possible time.
It's really interesting that you say that. And one thing that I've loved about starting Firo, my own bag brand, is like I get to learn from people like Luke, who's the founder of Bag Me, and like you. And there's one thing that Luke said to me like 6 or 7 months ago when I was struggling with this, and it really resonated with me. And you just reaffirmed it. And he's like, I'm like, but we have like this color needs to stay in stock, and this lane is like, mate, keep it simple. What are your best sellers? And I go, this, and this. And he goes, that's all you have to do is keep those in stock. If you can do the other ones on top of it, awesome. But like the core SKUs is just needs to be your entire business and build around that and then build on top of that. So you just basically reaffirm that as well. And I would assume that's probably just great advice for anybody who's running a product company.
And if you have a great designer like that, and you eventually realize, okay, here's my top three products, but they have the most complicated raw materials, then that's the time that you work together with your supply chain and your designer to find alternatives for that. If it's like a non-negotiable, no, this is the only raw materials I'm gonna use, this is the soul of the bag, then next is supply chain. Like, how do I own a little bit of stocks of this, or how can I like maintain a very strong relationship with my vendor, so whenever I make rush orders, they're not gonna delay it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the key takeaway there is to, if you have an understanding of what is that top products that you have, you can deep dive on you can have a deeper level of understanding on your raw materials and your supply chain after knowing that. The first thing is awareness, what products are those.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're almost looking at like optimizing it. It's like, cool, as a bag brand owner, I have this product, right? And it's doing very, very well. Let's break down materially, like, material by material, the lead times, and then say, all right, where are we most vulnerable? Where is this really taking the most time? And then can that be replaced? And the interesting thing about that is I can kind of see that as a double-edged sword though, because if you replace it with something that's more accessible, then you risk perhaps your product not being as special.
That's
But
right.
but if it's special, then it might take more time unless you're willing to possibly invest and buy bulk and then store it in an air-conditioned warehouse close-ish to your factory, right? So there's
Mhm.
no easy answer, but you got to kind of make sure you have that balance too, as to where you're not losing whatever is making that product very special, right? There might be a particular fabric or a mesh or a interior lining that requires custom development. Then the hard part then is, determining, is that what's pushing sales, or can so
Mhm.
that's just the internal debate that you have to have as the brand owner.
Yeah. And you mentioned, comparison of big brands and smaller brands earlier. So for big brands, they still get the out of stock scenario because, their supply chain maybe had an issue and problem. They are not exempted in waiting for their raw materials, but their advantage is their cash flow. If they are ordering so much bigger than other smaller brands, then they are the priority. And then they don't have problems paying 30%, 50% down payment so that the work starts right away. For smaller brands, cash flow is very it's like a huge issue. Inventory is the most expensive thing a bag brand owns, so restocking means that you have to make sure that you have the budget for deposit and balances and shipping and releasing duties and taxes, all of that. So Although no one is exempted, whether you're a big and smaller brands, but the smaller bag brands has to be smarter in their supply chain because you're considering a cash flow more than big brands.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Where do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, because yeah,
There's, there's
my
so many
experience.
angles. I'm actually overwhelmed by it. I'm like, oh, we can talk about this. Where do you think we should go?
Yeah, I wanted to share like my experience with KFC versus my experience in e-commerce right now. You
Give it
know,
to me.
in KFC, we don't have a limit on what we can buy. If I
They just gave
sense,
you a blank check.
yeah, if I sense that there will be an increase in the cost of chocolates and oils, which I what I handle before, then I can do a blank PO for 6 months and just send it to my vendor, and they're gonna save an entire warehouse for me.
So how would that work? This. So what would determine you as the specialist, right? What factors are you looking at then to make that determination of, oh crap, we got to crank it up this month?
Part of our work in KFC before is really looking at Bloomberg and all the,
Oh,
finance.
really?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. At age 23, I don't know, 22, I don't know what Bloomberg when I started, but I have to monitor crude oil every single day
Mm.
after I open my laptop and before I close my computer. That's
Did you
why.
did you dream about crude oil prices? Like, is that how deep in the world of oil you were?
Yes, because the specific product that I'm handling in KFC is oil and anything oil related. So,
Mm,
the pressure and everything is driven by oil. So,
mm.
even the owner of the company is going to need my recommendation on anything oil related. So that's why I'm also not very new with what's happening right now in our in the world in terms of oil because I've watched it before many many years ago. So in that sense, with the mindset of someone that has deep pocket, I can solve the solution right away. But as compared to being in a smaller food industry or oil industry that needs enough cash flow to buy raw materials, then they don't have it. They have to just buy whatever they can, and then when they need it again, they will use the new cost, which is so much higher than the previous. They cannot overbuy until because they have to make sure to budget everything that they have. So similar to DTC, 17 years of experience, 10 years in enterprise, 7 years in e-commerce, I've learned how to, you know, my expertise being in enterprise before, it's not good enough for DTC. You have to really you have to play smarter in your relationship with your vendors because they are your key partner, making sure your business runs, smoothly and with the support with whatever's happening in the supply chain world right now.
Yeah, I can say it's been just so awesome working with you guys because you have that expertise and amongst the whole team too. We actually had a call with your team yesterday and it was a really good call. I just want to let you know. Yeah, we went over some KPIs and we were looking at like our delivery rates and we're like, hey, this one's good, but this one's really bad. We got to work on that. And I'm like, I love this. Like I'm just learning so much and it just shows how multifaceted this entire industry is in terms of just trying to get everything great. Let me ask though, for let's say from small to mid-sized brands, one thing that can delay. All right, so the whole concept of this conversation is like, why is my bags out of why are the bags that I want
Mhm.
is it out of stock? So one thing I can see to happen, and you mentioned this earlier, is that as a bigger brand, you got more leverage. So, the factory wants to work with you more. It's a larger order. It's more money for the factory. Makes sense. So, what can happen, and I've seen it happen, is the smaller brands kind of get shifted around a little bit. It's like, okay, you're scheduled for mid-November. We're gonna have to push you to early December. I've seen it happen a lot. Do you have any advice maybe for small to mid-sized brands for how to maybe navigate those waters and make sure that something like that doesn't happen? Or
So
happens or even happens less? I mean, I'm sure it's unavoidable to some extent, right? The factory's gotta make their money.
yes, but there are factories also that have partners. So I think that's one thing that you need to consider when you're onboarding a partner is the risk mitigation of, whatever will happen, because it will always happen. There could be a blackout, labor issues that, it will delay every production.
Yeah.
So what's important are the risk mitigation of the vendor that you have. What happens if? So do they have like a nearby partner that can work on this? Because I know the big um manufacturer of bags in Vietnam, they somehow team up when something is needed to be solved.
Mhm.
Even their competitor, if there's a problem, someone will help the other. So m- I think it's very useful to have that understanding. What are the Ask them what have been your issues the past 5 years, and how did you solve that, because
Mm.
that will show you how they are going to solve the situation when it's your turn that has a problem. So that's number one. And of course, even with the best risk mitigation plan, SOP, that they have, there will still be sometimes issues where they have to, reschedule production. The goal there is to first have the best relationship possible. It's not always money and profit. Sometimes, if you really have a great connection, they value your mission and vision as a brand owner, then they will have to really not think about money all the time. They will consider your requirement. And if that is the case, then you can be assured that the schedule that you get is the best possible schedule, and it's because the entire supply chains is not working at the time.
I think that it's a really great point, and the relationship factor is key. Is the relationship factor is key as well. And I remember I had this conversation one time with, I can't remember who it was. It was a bag manufacturer in China, and basically what he said. You're familiar with the brand Air, Lada? They're really big in
Yes.
our industry.
Yes.
So he said to me, basically every factory's dream is to get Air. And what he said was Air started at their factory, which was like a mid-sized factory, and they've been with that same factory ever since. And they started from a no-name brand into the industry Goliath that they are today, but nowhere near as big as, let's say, like Samsonite or Tumi, right? So Air is this large mid-sized brand that grew in a single factory. And what that allowed is a great relationship, but also the factory isn't getting squeezed by Air, because a lot of these larger brands are going to look at a BOM and try to shave off every half a penny where they can, versus that's just more typical of like a publicly traded corporate company, right? But you have like a mid-sized brand like Air, a factory can have a bit more comfort working with them and have a bit more margin as well, because it's Air's not a corporate conglomerate looking to shed every little cost. Have you seen similar things in your experience?
Yes. And in majority of what I've seen that great brands do is the smaller alternative. We have one client in Move before. It's a squishy type of product. They started with a vendor that grew with them. So
Mm,
I think um they were the first ever client that gave them big PO, and they grew together. They bought machines, improved the factory based on the business that this client is giving them. And at some point, 3 years in, they became more viral than ever. And so this vendor cannot support them anymore. So they took our service so that we can find an alternative vendor, because they don't want to move move to totally new vendors, but they needed someone to help them with a peak season, because not every month of the year has the same, PO number. You will have really a high demand season, and for that high demand season, do you have an alternative vendor that you can tap just in case something happens? So it's not about replacing a very good relationship, but you also have to inform your vendor that when this happens, you have to understand that I have to, outsource other support. Otherwise, if I lose my business, you lose the big business that you get from us. So it's sometimes what's lacking with the brand owner and the vendor is having that deep conversations about business. And both of you are doing businesses, and you have to you have your own decision making with your business. But if you really take time to spend um like days to visit them and talk about your business, then they will really help you whenever there's a problem, and you for them as well.
I think that's such an important note because if we're looking at, the whole industry for, mid to small brand, mid-sized to small brands, and this is something that you bring up in other podcasts too that I listen to with, where you're like, visit your fucking factories. Hop on a plane, get to Guangdong, get to Ho Chi Minh or the Philippines, wherever you're made, and it's surprising to me how I think a lot of people visit their factories, but a lot of people don't. And
Mhm.
I think that if we're looking at this through the lens of the power of a relationship, if half of brands are not visiting their factories and you want an advantage with your own factory in terms of
Yeah.
priority and that relationship, taking that flight a couple times a year or at least once, right, to go over there, shake hands, tour the factory, get drunk with the team,
Yes.
like seriously, you go to Asia, they're going to take you out, they're going to get you out, especially in Vietnam, a lot of the factories are owned by Koreans. They take you out and you get Korean barbecue and you get drunk off of Korean wine, and it's a great time. So I think that's an underestimated it's just not a thing that I think people talk about, but I think it's extremely valuable as well in building
Yes.
that relationship and getting that priority.
Yes, I've seen it happen every time. When someone takes time to really visit and spend time discussing, it's gonna change entirely. A payment terms, if you want payment terms, which is very very important discussion, do it in person.
Yeah,
It
and if you think
really-
about it, sometimes that bag brand can't make that large deposit. So the order is delayed until they can get the cash for that. So if you want your bags to not be out of stock, if you lower the payment terms to a 20% deposit from a 60% deposit, then all of a sudden you can start production earlier, which then means that your bags are less likely to be out of stock. So it's this whole domino effect in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yes. And they have, especially, I'm speaking for factories in China because I know the support of government for Chinese manufacturers, which is huge. They have credit lines, they can have payment terms with their suppliers in China as well.
Mhm.
So if you have a good relationship with them, they can pass on that advantage to you. They're not doing it when you don't have a good relationship with them. But Chinese businessmen and manufacturers have a very huge advantage from their government. That's why they're booming, that's why they can operate. And that's sadly not the case here in the Philippines. For example, we're in terms of business, small to medium sized businesses, we're not as supported as much. But imagine you have a very good relationship with a vendor that can extend the advantages to you. You can have a better payment terms. They can even start. I know some who can start production without deposit. So yeah,
Well, it's
that
so
can work.
it's totally. I was just recently having another conversation with another Chinese manufacturer, and they blew my mind. They were like, dude, you have no idea. There's two worlds in China. There's the world if you're a foreigner trying to make things in China, you'll be treated one way. And there's I'm Chinese in China and you'll be treated a different way. And I don't mean that from like a cultural stance. What I mean is that in terms of their willingness to do things up front without payment. He was telling me that in China, if you're in the network and you're in China and you speak Mandarin and you're plugged in, that they'll just give you things for free. Like
Mhm.
no down payments needed, right? Because of the credit lines that are available, like you said. Versus if you're a faceless foreigner that they met on AliExpress or Alibaba, like then they're going to be extremely reluctant to provide that. But you might not be able to, as let's say, a European or a foreigner working with China, you might not be able to get that total like local advantage, but by going there, by
Yeah.
visiting, by developing those relationships, you can definitely give yourself an advantage over the other faceless competitors that you have who haven't done that and therefore are getting kind of like the not as great payment terms. Would you agree
Yeah.
with that?
Yes, because the culture. I even myself as an Asian, doing a lot of business in China, the first time I went there 3 years ago, it shocked me how different it is. The news, the way that I communicate with them, the barrier when you're discussing with them in WeChat or WhatsApp, it's very different when you're in front of them.
Mm,
As a someone in supply chain for a very long time, it still shocked me how what is the advantage of being here and discussing this important MOQ lead time payment terms with them in person. So
mm,
I couldn't push that enough. At least one when you have at least a year with them, it's worth the visit.
mm,
And it's not just negotiations and all. Sometimes you can think of a new business, new product with them. They can help you with warehouse. China has a huge space. They're very helpful with that. They can let you lend a warehouse for 30 days without payment. That's how they can extend. Those are the support that I've seen them do and extend to their clients.
Absolutely. And then you get your foot in with the network and then their supply chain. And the supply chain part is so interesting as well because you might be looking for a particular fabric that you think you need to have. And they're like, well, actually, we can get you like 95% there with this fabric, but it's going to be half the price and, like a much faster lead time. So it really just allows you to, that relationship is really everything in that sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and they can refer you to great partners as well. And that's something that you can only unlock if you have great relationships with them.
I want to kind of like on this topic of relationships, but also, we're talking about Vietnam, we're talking about China. It's been really interesting actually over the past 5 years. The Philippines has really been up and coming in the world of bags as a manufacturing destination. I get like 50 bags sent to me a month, right, to review for Nomads Nation. And one of the things I always do is I check the tag. I like to know where these things are being made. And I never saw Philippines before. And now I'm seeing a lot of Philippines in bags in general in terms of like where they're being manufactured. What are you seeing or hearing on the ground there? And do you think the Philippines is a viable alternative? Because on the flip side, while I think it's up and coming, so a lot of bag brands might be like, "Oh, that's where we'll go. We can cut costs and maybe have some advantages there." On the flip side, I don't think the supply chain is anywhere near as mature. So yes, maybe you cut down lead time or production time, but you still got to wait for all the supplies to get shipped over from Korea, China, and Vietnam. What are your thoughts on just the Philippines and just regional sort of strategy when it comes to picking a factory, specifically in Asia?
I think right now what's going to benefit in that scenario are bigger brands with bigger volume. And that's because we can send raw materials and keep it here for a longer period of time with the security of there will be a production of this within the next 6 months. And we have, a place here in the Philippines where bags are made. It's like protected with a certain tax. That's why all the factories are there. And
Mm,
so space location wise and labor, it's gonna compete.
mm,
But in the sense of really keeping raw materials within us, because we don't have the raw materials, everything's gonna come from China
mm,
anyway. So that's why what I'm saying is that if your bags reach a certain point of the extremes, the bigger ones and a very small one where 300 pieces are required, then that's possible. And then if for those bigger brands that you know ha- um thousands and thousands of production, then that's possible. But the in between, it has to it has to really go in a manufacturing where raw materials is not going to be a huge problem in supply chain.
I think that's great advice because yeah, I think if you're, let's say you're you're somebody who's thinking about starting a bag brand or any brand in general, and or an e-commerce company, and you can build around the advantages of being in somewhere like the Philippines, and understanding the supply chain constraints, there could be a lot of advantages there. Because, like you said, on the MOQ side, that's one thing you got to get crushed for in Vietnam, where they're like, hey, 600. And that could be a lot when you're spending 50, 60, $70 for BOM costs on a backpack. So there can be advantages from a cost perspective. And then for the large companies who are willing to kind of do that long-term investment,
Yes.
move all their shit across the ocean, right? And then really, that's a 5-year plan really where you're
Yeah.
trying to get an ROI from. But I also agree if you're in the middle, probably not the best move
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Yeah.
Stick to what's proven.
Yeah. This is one tip that I wanted to share with founders. When you are designing a product or a bag specifically, have that deeper understanding not only with the raw materials but the construction. Sometimes as an owner, make me this, design me this, and let's go. Where do you produce it? If you have bag me, for example, involve yourself in the construction, production, design of that. Because if you don't know how your bags are being produced, it the, connected to visiting a factory so that you know the step by step, right, of how your bags is produced, you will not be successful in finding an alternative when the right time needs it to be changed. So for example, you need to change manufacturer because of growth and not because you have a bad relationship with the vendor. It will be so hard for you if you don't have that um technical designs plus the SOP of how to do it. And majority of the owners that we have right now, they have the tech pack or product specification sheet, but they don't have the step by step from one step to the last step of producing their bags. It is now a requirement, just like for formulated products. You have the raw materials for a shampoo, but then there's a step one to step 10 how to mix it and batch it, etc. For finished goods, it will give you a huge advantage if you know step one until the last step, and very seldom is doing it.
I agree. I would think it's important to note for anybody who's thinking about starting a backpack brand or the smaller brands is that a factory is not really a developer. I mean, they will help you with that, right? They have staff, but really they're a factory. Their goal is to, as efficiently as possible, make as many products for you as possible and really focus on that margin, right? So like, and their margins are tight, so it's not that they're trying to screw you over, but they are trying to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
So I can say that, having someone like Bag Me on my end has been so helpful because I know that I have somebody then who can slow things down a little bit and really focus on a quality construction as opposed to letting the factory do it. And most factories can do a great job with that. So what I recommend maybe is like, because I feel bad for a lot of aspiring e-commerce entrepreneurs where they might hear this like, oh my god, I got to pay the development team, I got to pay move supply chain, I have a day job, what am I supposed to do? It's a lot of costs. But I think that the goal is just to get off the ground, right, and get things moving. But as you gain that traction, reinvesting then into experts like yourself or like with BagMe, just really helps to give you an advantage and provides clarity so then you can focus on what you're good at. And I'd also recommend, like, maybe you don't need a BagMe if you have a background in product development, or
Yeah.
that's the thing that you're willing to spend the resources and time to kind of learn and to take ownership of yourself, right? I didn't do that. I mean, I've obviously reviewed a lot of bags. I know a lot about bags, but from a design perspective, I'm lost. It's just not my cup of tea, right? So I think that you got to sort of figure out where your strengths and where your weaknesses are as an operator and as an entrepreneur, and then try and fill those out as best that you can on the weakness side of things so you can focus on what you're good at.
Yes, because important connection to that. If you encounter a problem in the future, if you're expert on it, then it's very easy for you to solve it. But if for example, you're not in the NPD creation design part and you don't have BAGME, then you will solve your problem by yourself, or worse, you will hire them in a more expensive way because now it's a problem, and not a collaboration. So when you needed help, you have to really think about the future of that category, because otherwise it will not grow, or it will work in the beginning, but it's hard to maintain the e-commerce. That's why many e-commerce are failing from its first, second year. As they encounter more problems, they can't handle it anymore.
100%. Lara, I appreciate your time. Anything you want to sign off on? Anything you guys are working on over at MSC?
No, but we're very excited working with Fyro. We're not excited because we've seen, some misoptimization, but the surprise of the happiness of a supply chain expert is when there's something to improve. So not just with Fire, but with all our clients, we're trying to find something that we can still improve. And I'm very happy that we are figuring things out together. And I think that's the good part of working with different brands right now and partners like you, is that we also learn. I will not be connected with Bagme without you. So not being able to visit other vendors in Ho Chi Minh as well. So I'm very fortunate to have worked with you and other partners. And I think my next steps is just right now is more of like networking and being there. We'll be back in China this October and Vietnam as well. So yeah, I'm just very excited with the work that we're doing right now.
It was really cool. Like I said, I had a call with your team yesterday, and we really focused on. There was a couple things. Like we're really focusing on just delivery optimization. So like, and it's so interesting because like these are things that is I'm not good at. Like I'm on the marketing side. I want to make videos and write copy and like build a brand. That's just what sets my heart on fire. So that's where I want to
Mhm.
be all the time. So when I see like things with FedEx or something, I'm like, ah, yeah, yeah, I'll get to that later, And it's been interesting though because like you guys did a full report yesterday where it was like, hey, FedEx says that they are going to ship to these countries in this time frame, but we're only hitting 30% of that, and I'm like, what? That's crazy, And it's like, but don't worry, we can optimize this. We're going to set up a meeting and try and figure this out. So seeing that sort of proactive approach of here's a problem, and like you said, yeah, it's not like we're happy to find problems, but it does present opportunities to make the business so much better. And the second thing that I'm working on with your team right now, which I'm sure you know, but I'm just excited about it, is packaging optimization. Not
Mhm.
no, not from like a storytelling premium perspective, but we're gonna work on that with Sierra is her name, right? Sierra.
Sheila.
Sheila. I'm sorry, Sheila. Sheila, she's great, but also looking at how we're putting bags in boxes and how expensive boxes are to ship, and then realizing we are actually spending way too much money on volumetric shipping costs. So we're readdressing how we're putting bags in boxes so we can actually lower the shipping costs, and then hopefully pass that on to customers as well. So I was like, yeah, it's a box, it's fine, but now you double click into it, you realize there's so many opportunities for improvements and optimization.
Yes, I'm excited for you because yeah, again, if that's not your expertise, then it's good thing to partner with an expert so that you can focus on where you're good at. That's exactly the support that we're aiming to give.
Appreciate it a lot. Appreciate your time. We'll be in touch soon. And guys, anybody might be listening still, if you guys are interested in working with Move Supply Chain, just check out the first pinned comment below, and also put it in the description. Lada, appreciate your time. We'll chat soon.
Thank you, Aaron.
Bye.